Hey guys, I want to share with you how I transformed this old storage bench. This is how it looked before, and this is what it looks like now. As you can see, the cushions need to be replaced with new foam. They're very thin and uncomfortable to sit on, so I'm going to use thicker foam cushions. And I'm going to add black vinyl fabric on the outside. It also needs a paint job and new hinges to support the seat when you lift it up. Okay, so let's get started. There's a broken hinge on the inside when you lift the seat, so I'm going to start off by unscrewing that. Now I'm going to use a flathead screwdriver to remove the staples that are attaching the fabric to the inside of the wood. Now I'm unscrewing the continuous hinge that's attaching the seat to the storage bench. I flipped over the wooden seat and removed the black vinyl and the foam that's stapled to the wood. So now I have the two pieces of wood that are ready to be painted. I'm only going to spray paint one side of the wooden boards using this Rust-Oleum semi-gloss in black. If you're going to cover up all the wood with fabric, then you can just skip this step. Once the paint was dry, I flipped the wooden boards to the unpainted side. So I'm putting the original foam cushion on top, but I'm also adding another layer to make the seat cushion thicker and more comfortable to sit on. And because I didn't want the pattern to show, I flipped the cushion over to the flat side. I'm covering the foam cushions with a durable cotton batting before adding the fabric because it prevents the cushions from moving around and it keeps everything in place. Just make sure it's a batting that's not thin enough to tear apart. I made sure that the batting was a few inches longer than the wood because I wanted to staple the batting to the wood. I'm using a staple gun to staple the batting to the wooden board. I stapled the edges first and then I worked on the corners. I hammered down the staples to make sure that they were secure. When you're working on the corners, make sure that the front side of the seat cushion is as smooth as possible. So you're going to need to adjust the fabric a little bit before you start stapling. Okay, so this is what the front side of the seat cushion looks like so far. I'm attaching this black vinyl fabric to the seat cushions. This one is much thicker than the one that was on the bench before. This was the previous vinyl fabric, which you can see is much thinner and flimsier. I actually ended up saving this fabric and using it later on the bench. So I laid out the vinyl fabric and placed the wood and cushion on top of the fabric. I cut the vinyl a little longer than the cushion and wood so that I could staple the vinyl to the wooden board. You may need to trim the fabric and batting on the corners to make the stapling a little bit easier. Now I trimmed the excess vinyl fabric and cotton batting all the way around. And this is what the front side looks like. And I did the same thing to the other cushion. I flipped the seat cushion over to the back side, and you can keep the cushion as is if you don't mind seeing the staples when you lift up the seat. But I personally didn't want them to show, so I used the previous fabric to cover up the staples. I fit and trimmed the fabric to size and then glued it on with a permanent fabric adhesive such as Fabri-Tac, but I later found that E6000 glue to be way better because it was just more of a permanent seal. You can also hammer in decorative nails to hold the fabric in place, and that might even look nicer. So I'm adjusting the fabric and gluing it down all the way around to cover up the staples. And now I'm doing the same thing for the other cushion. So now I'm going to paint the actual bench. I'm using Rust-Oleum Painter's Touch in semi-gloss in black. I'm not going to worry about the edges for now because they're made out of plastic and latex paint will not adhere to it. The outside part of the bench on the bottom is not real wood, but I think it's some kind of a laminate material, so ideally you do want to sand the surface before you paint it, but when I painted it, it stuck on really well and I didn't want to go through the process of sanding the whole thing. It seemed like the surface was dull enough for the paint to stick on. I've had the bench for a few years now and I haven't had any problems with the paint chipping off, so you should sand it, but I personally skipped this step. So I did one coat of paint, allowed it to dry, and then did 2 more coats of paint. I also painted the inside of the bench to make it all one color. So I did get some paint on the plastic part of the bench, and I first used a scraper to scrape off some of the paint, and after realizing how long it was taking, I ended up using some acetone or nail polish remover and it wiped it right off. So I'm painting the plastic areas using a spray paint that adheres to plastic. Because the spray paint and the ultra cover paint didn't exactly match, even though they were both black and were from the same company, you could slightly see a difference in color between the spray paint and the latex paint. So I went ahead and did another coat of the latex paint on the bench after I spray painted the edges. So the bench is all done and painted and ready for the cushions and hinges to be put on. I bought these hinges on Amazon and they're not as bulky as the previous ones and they're much more durable. I'm using longer screws than the ones that came in the package because those were too small and weak. So I just tried to position the hinges evenly for one side and I used the screwdriver to screw in just the bottom part. Now I took the completed cushion board and placed it behind the hinges so that it's leaning against the wall, because it's easier to screw in that way. Then I took the other cushion and adjusted them to make sure that they fit evenly on each side. Then I just drilled in the rest of the screws. So now the hinges are finally screwed on and they look great. So now when I lift the cushions, you could see how durable the hinges are holding them up. And now the storage bench is finally done. This is how it looked before, and this is how it looks now. Thanks for watching my video and make sure to subscribe. Let me know in the comments section what other kind of videos you would be interested in.